Hey, movie friends. Welcome back to the podcast. This is Anthony.
And this is James, and today we're going to continue our Game of Thrones week. We just did House Stark and did an episode on all those characters and their storylines throughout the 8-season show. Now we're going to do House Lannister, and eventually we'll do House Targaryen in a couple weeks. So we're going to focus on Lannister today. We're going to go over the characters, their stories throughout every season pretty much, and I can't wait to talk about it because Game of Thrones is highly requested by everyone. And yes, it's a break from the film, but I think it's going to be fun.
And the Lannisters are a great family. They're basically like the hot mess of Westeros, just a complete hot messes of a family.
Like they would have a reality show.
Everyone hates each other. There's incest. Their family's a mess. But the Lannisters have important parts to play in their roles in Westeros, and some of them have the largest storylines throughout the entire story. There's Cersei and Tyrion, you could argue, have two of the main lead roles of the entire franchise.
And the sigil of House Lannister is the Golden Lion over Crimson, and they have two models, really. They have Hear Me Roar, which is very seldom used throughout the show. That's like their official model, but instead they use A Lannister Always Pays His Debts instead. And those are both, I think, the Golden Lion over Crimson, that symbolizes how they want to be a royal family, and they are a royal family despite not coming from nobility. They've kind of obtained power by being close to powerful people, like especially Tywin, how he was Hand of the King, and then eventually put Cersei. He arranged the marriage of Cersei to Robert Baratheon to get power over the Iron Throne eventually with Joffrey. So he's kind of put the family into position to get all this power.
Well, the Lannisters were kings before Aegon Targaryen took the entire continent over, and the reason why the Lannisters. And we mentioned earlier how the biggest difference from the Lannisters and the Starks is the Lannisters are so political because they reside in King's Landing and Casterly Rock, and so they're constantly interacting with politicians, with bureaucrats and influential figures of Westeros, and so that's why like Cersei and Tyrion especially are so adept politically. But House Lannister, it gained its power basically kind of through luck based upon where it was geographically located on Casterly Rock. And the Lannisters happened to be on this land that had immense amounts of gold and silver, and their gold mine gave them immense wealth. And
plus it's a port city, right?
It's a port city as well. So it's literally the best part of the best piece of land you could get.
And that's their ancestral stronghold, basically.
Yeah, Casterly Rock.
Before we continue, we need your help. The best way to support Raiders of the Lost Podcast is go to patreon.com/Raiders of the Lost Podcast and become a patron today. Patrons get perks like personalized messages, personalized videos, our podcast schedules for episodes that are upcoming. Top tier patrons get a monthly shout out on the podcast, as well as a ton of exclusive video content and monthly giveaways. Head on over to our website, RaidersOfTheLostPodcast.com. Check out all of our sources of content, our merch, our custom movie posters, and you can also become a patron there.
But having this wealth is what has always given them power, because they've used their money to influence other people, to make allies with houses, and they'll also like fund campaigns that other houses want. Like if a certain house wants to do some kind of action or some kind of campaign, the Lannisters will fund them and give them the money for that in exchange for being allies or for whatever other kind of service or whatever they can get out of that other family. So the Lannisters have been able to use their wealth to great advantage to make themselves a stronghold in the political, social stratosphere of Westeros.
Yeah, plus they all have these traits of like pride, and they're more interested in themselves and self-gain. Tywin specifically is more interested in the dynasty of Lannisters, and he wants to make a dynasty that will rule for thousands of years, whereas his children, Cersei especially, and Jaime, and eventually, the grandchildren, they become very selfish with their power. And Cersei, especially when she gets on the Iron Throne, all she cares about is herself, her pride, her having power.
Well, that's because when Cersei gets the throne, her 3 children have been killed.
Yeah,
they've died. And so once she lost her children, which was her main point of living and motivation for everything she did, when she lost that, she just corrupted herself with the power of being the queen,
because she doesn't have an heir. So it doesn't even matter anymore that the Lannister line is going to end as long as she maintains power, even though she does get pregnant, but obviously that doesn't end well.
Yeah, exactly. And it's a tragic end for Cersei, but the thing with Cersei is she's a villain, but she has a great story arc, and we really empathize with her. She's great in the books. You can really you learn more about her, and you really gain a lot of empathy for her. But the Lannisters came into power recently because Cersei was married to Robert Baratheon after Robert's rebellion, and they took the throne. And Tywin basically set up a marriage from Cersei to Robert. And Cersei actually, she has a lot in common with Sansa. I think that's why she treats Sansa so horribly, because she was married off. And although she was excited to marry Robert at first, very much how Sansa was excited to be with Joffrey at first, what happened was Robert revealed very early on by accident that he was always in love with Lyanna Stark. And he even called Cersei Lyanna on their wedding night when they were being intimate in the bedroom. And so from that moment on, Cersei rejected Robert, and there was never any love between them.
There's that one line where she says, "I felt something for you once," but that was like about it. Maybe for like it
was like before they got married, the courtship.
Same, like you said with Sansa and Joffrey, and also with Robert Baratheon coming into the power, that was also dependent on the Lannisters, because Jaime's the one who killed Aegon Targaryen. He's the Kingslayer, and then because of that, Tywin helped place Robert Baratheon on the throne, and then he was able to marry Cersei to him.
Yeah, exactly. And Cersei actually, when she was 15, I think 15 or 16, some teenage year, she and a friend, they went to a witch to get their fortunes told. And Cersei was told by the witch that she would have 3 children and they would all die. And that eventually comes true, because she does end up giving birth to 3 kids, and they all die from different circumstances. Joffrey's poisoned, Myrcella is poisoned, and then Tommen commits suicide.
And that reminds me so much of Daenerys, because I think George R.R. Martin really wants us to constantly be comparing these 2 powerful women, Daenerys and Cersei, because, like you just mentioned, they both have 3 children. It's like the good queen versus the bad queen, then it kind of reverses, and they're like these mirror images of each other. And one's like a humanitarian, Dany, at first, and then one's an oppressor with Cersei. And the people hate Cersei, but the people who follow Daenerys love her. You could argue that they were on this collision course that was so inevitable for the entire show. They're both blonde, powerful. They have 2 brothers. They use fire for mass destruction and death. They're put into marriage contracts by their family, Dany by her brother, and then Cersei by her father. And then they have, like I said, 3 children who get killed off one by one.
And also part of that prophecy said that Cersei would be outdone by a more beautiful queen than her.
And the children of Dany are the dragons, FYI.
Yeah, exactly. So they both have 3 children.
She doesn't have any kids, yeah.
Yeah, I think Cersei is the closest of the 3 kids to their father, Tywin, who was a very strong person. And his father, I can't remember his name, but the Lannister before him was very weak-willed. He's the one who bent the knee to Targaryen. And Tywin always looked down on his father. And so when his father died, Tywin took control, and he's been steering the Lannister family in the direction of building a dynasty, like you said earlier, in the direction of honor and of sustaining control over Westeros, because they always have had a certain amount of control, because they've been adding to the Westeros's bank. So they've been helping just the entire continent with their money. And so they have always played a pivotal role. And the 3 children of Tywin, they're all so different from one another. And I think Tyrion, obviously Peter Dinklage, especially when Ned was killed, he was the face of the franchise for a few years. Tyrion has the best dialogue. He always has. He's been the most entertaining character to see. And he's very relatable because, like Jon Snow, he's an outcast. He's like he says, all dwarves are bastards in their father's eyes. And so I think the audience really grew to love Tyrion, not just because he's funny, but because we can relate to him.
Yeah, seasons 3 and 4, he really just grows so much, and we get so much of him because he goes through intense things where he's put on trial. He kills both his lover and his father, and he's the least Lannister of the family. He's hated by his father and by Cersei, his sister. Cersei constantly calls him like the creature who killed their mother, and to come into this world, and he's actually called like a monster throughout Westeros.
Everyone refers to him as a monster.
And people like have these like rumors of him like having like these weird limbs, and he's like a monstrosity.
Well, in the books, his face is actually a little deformed. Mm-hmm. So he gets scarred in the show from the Battle of Blackwater, but in the books he has a little bit more of a messed up face.
Yeah, and there's this constant back and forth with him and Tywin, where Tywin refuses to admit that he's his son. He's always like, I can't prove that you're my son, but you are a Lannister, because Tywin doesn't... I think they set it up to be... We think it's Tywin's prejudice towards the way that Tyrion was born, which is why he doesn't want to admit he's really his son or treat him like Jaime or like Cersei. But I think eventually there are all these rumors where, some very interesting rumors where Tyrion is actually a Targaryen, and we have those similarities with Jon and Dany, where they kill their mothers in childbirth, which all Targaryens do, and he has these similar traits that Jon kind of has, where he has like this power that the Targaryens have, but he also has like the political savvy of the land.
And the three of them form an allyship by season 7 and 8, and they become the three main players for the side of good. And Tyrion actually has a very tragic backstory, because when we meet him, he's a womanizer. He sleeps with as many prostitutes as he can. He drinks himself into oblivion every night. But he seems to be very positive in terms of not letting his physicality bring him down. That's what he's learned. He's learned that he tells Jon, don't let the things that make you different affect you negatively, because then no one will be able to use it against you. But Tyrion, there's a reason why he has these negative attributes, like being an alcoholic and sleeping with all these women, and it's because of how he was raised. Because, like you said, Tyrion hated him, Cersei hated him. Jaime's the only one in the family who actually showed him any kind of friendship or loyalty. They always got along really well. They always had a great relationship, which is why Jaime eventually helps him escape his prison cell before his sentencing. But Tyrion grew up. It was very difficult. Yes, he grew up as a Lannister, wealthy, a child of privilege, but he was called a monster, and his own family hated him, and everyone who saw him, it's not a good. It was not a good. Westeros is not a good place for someone like him. You know what I mean? And the reason why he has such an inability to ever form a meaningful relationship with someone until it's eventually Shay is because of this trick that the Lannisters pulled on him when he was a teenager, where Tyrion met a woman at a pub, and she was intimate with him, and she's the first person he had sex with, and he fell in love with her immediately, and he wanted to marry her right away. But that night he discovered that Tywin hired the woman to have sex with him as a way to help him lose his virginity, and he was mocked for that too. And so the only person he ever felt loved him was a hired prostitute. So that's why he has an inability to ever gain a meaningful connection with other women.
Yeah, and he does have that bond with Jaime, but Jaime still kind of treats him differently a lot of times. Especially there's that scene where after Jaime pushes Bran out of the tower, and he's talking about if the boy survives, he'll probably be a cripple his whole life. And Jaime's talking about how, like, if he ever was a cripple or was like grotesque, he would just ask for a quick death while he's sitting there talking to Tyrion. And then Tyrion has that great retort where he's like, speaking for the grotesque, life is full of possibilities. He has this like will to live that a lot of people don't have, that would be in his position, or maybe that are born different than everyone else.
Yeah, and Tyrion, his ability to survive and thrive in these situations is second to none. That's why he becomes the hand to the king and then the hand to the queen. You know what I mean? It's he rises up the ranks, and but even so, the thing with Tywin is, even though he hates Tyrion, he still is so devoted to family honor. That's why he promotes Tyrion to Hand of the King in his absence, because Tyrion asks him, why are you making me Hand of the King while you're gone? And Tywin says, because you're a Lannister. So he doesn't say because you're my son. He says because you're a Lannister. You know what I mean? The Lannister family is better than everyone else. And even though I hate you and I blame you for my wife's death, you're still a Lannister.
And even if he isn't his son, he's still his wife's son. So he has the last name Lannister. So yeah, he's a Lannister.
Yeah, and Tyrion's journey is such a major transformation from spoiled prince to becoming a person who's gone through great trauma, lost so much. And he becomes a good person. He becomes a moral person, and he becomes the moral compass for Daenerys for the later seasons of the show.
Yeah, he's kind of similar to Tony Stark. They have like a similar story arc where they're highly intelligent sons of extreme privilege. They both are very arrogant. They're trying to have a good time every day. They forget their traumas with distractions, with womanizing, with alcohol and drugs, and end up maturing more than any of the other characters in the entire story. They understand the morality of their actions, and they're able to do real good in the end.
Yeah, and the thing with him, Daenerys, and Jon Snow is, like I said earlier, they form an alliance. It's like they're three outcasts. because
They're all bastards in their own right.
But yeah, well, Daenerys isn't a bastard,
But in a way, she's similar to the bastards.
but I'm saying as an outcast, not as a bastard.
But they can be synonyms.
Yeah, but technically, yeah, I guess. But I mean, I'm just saying outcast in terms of Jon Snow is an outcast, Daenerys is an outcast because she was literally hidden in exile, and then Tyrion is an outcast in his own family.
Yeah.
So the three of them have a lot in common.
Yeah, we're saying the same thing.
I know. I'm just saying not they're not.
I know
bastards.
she's not literally a bastard.
And Tyrion's not literally a bastard.
Could be.
It's a rumor.
It's possible.
We'll have to ask Martin, see when he finishes the final book
In 2028. He's like, I got $50 million from Amazon. I'm just chilling for now. I'm 1 page a month. Let's go.
But Tyrion, he becomes vital to literally. He literally saves King's Landing at the Battle of Blackwater. Like, it's because of his idea to use the wildfire against Stannis' army that they won, because if not, Stannis would have taken King's Landing no problem.
And that's like the only time where his father kind of sort of liked him or showed like any kind of maybe affection via discourse.
Yeah. Kind of like a nod of like, okay, you did well.
Maybe for a minute he forgot that he hates his guts and wants him to die.
Yeah, exactly. But the thing with that is, Varys even says to him, no one will ever know what you did or remember you for what you did in this battle and how you saved the city. But he's like, you saved the city by yourself, basically. Mm-hmm. And he forms a bond with Varys, because the thing with Varys is you never really know if he's good or bad. He's always like
ambiguous kind of.
Yeah, ambiguous, because he's the master of whispers, and he is working for the Lannisters. You know what I mean? They're employing him as the master of whispers, but he also seems to be aiding those who are obviously the obvious protagonists of the show. And I think it's not until he finally helps escort Tyrion out of King's Landing that we know he is a good man, because he didn't have to save Tyrion. Because Jaime helped him escape the cell, but then Varys helped him leave the city.
Because he had just killed Shay, he had just killed his father.
Yeah.
And he even calls him his friend when he's like, what have you done, my friend, or something like that.
It wasn't until that moment where I was like, okay, Varys is a good guy, ultimately.
And then because later on their relationship gets more complicated, because Varys, like you just said, he's kind of working for the good of King's Landing in a way, and he wants to assassinate Dany and poison her. And that's when Tyrion tells Dany that Varys is going to try to kill her, which unfortunately leads to him being destroyed and burned alive by the dragons.
Yeah. And Sir Jorah Mormont was the first part of that, where Jorah was sent to find Dany to kill her, although he had eventually he fell in love with her and became her loyal servant. He too was like the first part of that attempt to kill her, when news of her was spreading into Westeros.
So you could say that that's a major mistake that Tyrion made by betraying Varys' friend, because, I mean, obviously he couldn't predict how Dany would react when she saw King's Landing while she was on top of the dragon and wanting her revenge for what was taken from her in her eyes.
Yeah, exactly. Like, no one knew that would happen. And also Jaime being the third child, not third in line, but I think he's the third least important, but still very important character. He also goes through such a major transformation, because his character, he also has a kind of a flawed, tragic backstory where everyone calls him the Kingslayer. And because of this, no one really trusts him. And they think that everyone looks down at him as like, you were a Kingsguard who killed your own king.
Man without honor.
Yeah,
that's what they call him.
Exactly. And no one calls him by name. Everyone calls him Kingslayer, and he hates it. He wants everyone to call him Jaime. But the problem with what happened was, when he killed the Targaryen, he killed him because the king ordered Jaime to slaughter the city of innocents. And so Jaime killed them as a way of rejecting that to save the city. But no one really knew that or understood why he was the Kingslayer. And because of that, everyone thinks he just stabbed the king in the back because he had no...
Yeah, we don't find that out until he's in that like hut bath with Brienne, and he's like, you all look at me the same, man without honor, Kingslayer. And he's like, no one understands what I did. And he explains that Targaryen, he had hidden wildfire all throughout the city. He was going to burn the entire city down while Baratheon and Tywin were coming for King's Landing. He was going to take it all down with him and burn everyone alive. And so Jaime had to stop that, and he actually did a very honorable thing, saving countless lives, but no one knows.
Yeah, and Jaime has always been a flawed character, but he has a lot of strengths. He's he's regarded as possibly the best fighter in all the Seven Kingdoms, and Ned Stark is the only one who could rival him. Maybe Oberyn Martell as well, but
they have that. Is their duels like a draw, right?
Yeah, they end. It's not a draw, but people show up and end it, so it doesn't end in bloodshed. But they are rivals, and the thing with Jaime is he is so devoted to his sister that he'll do anything for her, and that's why he is a Kingsguard, because he didn't have to be a Kingsguard again when Baratheon took the seat of the Iron Throne, but he chose to be a Kingsguard to Robert because it would keep him close to Cersei, which is his only intention and motivation, is being close to Cersei.
That's all he ever wants is to be with Cersei. And even later in the later seasons, when the Dead Army comes and he kind of turns his back on Cersei it's the first time he's ever stood up to her, and he leaves to go fight with the armies in the north to stop the Dead Army. He eventually comes back to her, where he could have this relationship with Brienne after they developed so much together.
I thought they were gonna. Yeah. That was one of my main problems with the series, was that he went back to Cersei, because when he rejected Cersei and left, I was like, wow, Jaime is really transformed as a person, and he's overcome his past. But then he went back to her, and I was like, oh, he should have been with Brienne.
But I mean, it's his character, it's the things he does for love. That's what he says before when he pushes Bran up the tower, and I think it kind of. It confirms that their love is real between him and Cersei. So I think in a way it was inevitable that they should be together at the end and die together. So he kind of took the chance where he's probably going to die just to be with Cersei one last time.
Yeah. And Cersei and Jaime didn't start getting together until after Cersei married Robert, when she began to disgust Robert and couldn't stand him. Then she turned to Jaime for intimacy and affection. It's not like they were kids doing this all their lives. But when they were kids, the thing with the Lannister children is they weren't really raised by parents. Even though they had all the wealth in the world, Tywin was Hand of the King at the time, and their mother was dead because of Tyrion's birth. And so the three Lannister kids, they were raised by servants, basically, all their lives, like servants and teachers. And so they didn't have parental figures in their lives at all, ever. And so I think that's why the three of them, they do have, they're very flawed individuals, because they didn't have a strong parent around.
And I love Jaime's story arc, because he goes from villain, he pushes a child out of a tower, to hero pretty much, and becomes an honorable man, in my opinion. He does after he loses his hand, that was like the main character transformation for him. Like watching his hand get chopped off. Like, I was blown away when I saw it. I couldn't believe that happened.
Yeah, because he was defined by his strength as a warrior.
Yeah, and so he loses his hand. It changes his identity completely. And every Lannister eventually started to treat him differently. Like when he comes back to King's Landing, and even Cersei looks at him differently. She's like, how could you think that everything would be the same? You come back here like nothing's changed. It's, he doesn't have a hand. And Tywin treats him differently. So he even says something like, all the Lannisters are a pain in my ass because I lost my hand, except for Tyrion. He's the only one who empathizes with him and feels bad for him.
Especially now that he's been deformed and has lost so much of his identity. And the thing with Tywin is that Tywin was never happy with Jaime becoming a Kingsguard ever. He always wanted Jaime to be the Lord of Casterly Rock, where the Lannisters hail from. But Jaime always chose to be a Kingsguardman rather than being a Lord, because he, like I said earlier, he always wants to be near Cersei. And so when he comes back, and now that he has lost his hand, he's right-handed, so there's no way he could be close to the warrior he once was. And so Tywin thinks this is an opportunity for my son to finally take up the mantle and be Lord of Casterly Rock and look over our namesake and our property. But again, Jaime refuses once again, doesn't want to be Lord, doesn't want to find a wife. He wants to be a Kingsguardman still and be as close to Cersei as he possibly can.
Because Cersei is his biggest weakness throughout his entire life in his adulthood. And that's what really leads to his downfall, is Cersei, because she makes him act erratically. And once she has power and she's on the throne, she controls him. Like, once you do this, you can get what you want, only then. So she uses his obsessed love for her against him and to control him.
He has no power in the situation. She always has the power. The thing with Cersei is, she's a great character, and yes, she's a wicked villain. She's horrible. But the reason why we always stick with her, and the reason why we never lose empathy with her is because of what she's motivated by, and that's her children. Cersei, before anything, is a mother, and everything she ever did was motivated by protecting her children and making sure they were successes. And so you can never really look too horribly on that character because she's always just trying to be a good mother to her children.
Yeah, she has that great line where she's talking to Joffrey when, like, before he's about to, I think right before he's about to be king or right when he gets crowned, where she says, "Everyone who isn't us is an enemy." And she loves nobody except for her children and her family, mostly just her children. Like, if she didn't have children, she would probably love nobody except for maybe Jaime. And the thing with Cersei is she always seems to get her revenge too. And like how Lannisters always pay their debts, that also kind of that fits into this theme of Lannisters also getting revenge. So like we pay our debts, and then also revenge can be a debt for us as well.
Yeah, like when she ends up killing all the Faith militant by blowing up the scepter with the wildfire. That's her getting revenge for them imprisoning her and forcing her to go on that walk of shame.
Yeah, it's like all of her enemies all at once.
Yeah, so you're right. They always do eventually get their revenge in ways. But the thing with Cersei is her prophecy came true, and she has such a tragic story because her pursuit of trying to prepare her children and protect her children ends in vain because they all die, and she buries all 3 of her kids, and that's horrible thing for a mother to do, which is why when she finally becomes the queen, you can see the look on her face when she's being crowned and coronated. It's like she's not happy. It came at the cost of everything, of her children, and I think that once that happens, she's just full villain mode because she's lost everything that was good in her life, and that good that she had to live for is gone. And so that's why she becomes such a wicked queen.
And really her last moments before her death are like the most empathetic we feel for her, where she's with Jaime and she's like, I want our child to live. I want them to survive, and I want to be a mother again. So it's actually like a touching moment to actually feel empathy for her right before her doom.
Yeah, it's like she wants to like escape and do everything differently in a way.
More on that after our intermission. This intermission is brought to you by our friends at Manscaped. Use our coupon code Raiders of the Lost at checkout for 20% off and free shipping. And intermission is a lot of fun if you're new to it. You haven't heard it yet. We do some fun trivia and movie questions and see who's the smartest movie person in the room between me and Anthony. All right, let's start our intermission with our movie quote competition. I will go first, and Anthony will have to guess what movie this quote is from.
Let's go.
You don't know about real loss because it only occurs when you've loved something more than you love yourself.
Say it again.
I'll do it with the proper accent. You don't know about real loss because it only occurs when you've loved something more than you've loved yourself.
Departed.
Nope. Close. Well,
oh, it's Good Will Hunting.
Yeah.
It's Robin Williams.
Yes, sir.
At the park. That was a horrible Boston accent.
There's no A words, no AR words in that.
Sure.
You don't know about real loss, kid, because it only occurs when you've loved something more than you love yourself, kid.
That monologue is what got Robin Williams the Oscar, for sure.
It's one of the most moving speeches I've ever heard in a movie.
That's great. Okay, my turn. Do you know what this is? It's the world's smallest violin playing for just the waitresses.
Reservoir Dogs.
Yeah.
And that's Steve Buscemi's character, Mr. Pink.
Mr. Pink. Mr. Pink. I want my coffee filled 12 times.
Why do I gotta be Mr. Pink? Why can't I be Mr. Brown? You have a cool name.
You're Mr. Pink.
Who didn't tip?
Who didn't tip?
You don't believe in it? What do you mean you don't believe in it?
Give me $1. Everyone throwing $1.
I'm paying for your breakfast. All right, we can go on. Let's move on to guess this movie release year. Casino.
1996.
1995. One off.
Oh, man. Close. The Thing.
1982.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah.
Good job.
Oh, yeah.
Nice.
I'm good.
Nice.
All right. Movie pop quiz time. Who played Roller Girl in Paul Thomas Anderson's film Boogie Nights?
What's her name? Oh, man.
She's also in The Hangover.
Yeah, and she's in Austin Powers, too. I can't remember her name.
You're going to be so upset when you hear it.
I can't remember it.
Heather Graham.
Heather Graham. Damn it. All right. John McTiernan is the director of Die Hard. He also made another classic action movie, one of the best of all time. What was it?
Predator.
Yeah. Nice job.
Let's go.
Jim got 3.
3 for 3.
3 for 3. Good job.
Thanks. Biggest hater of the week. One of my favorite ones was we posted a clip of how these psychiatrists diagnosed Anakin Skywalker with bipolar disorder. What was it?
Multiple borderline personality disorder.
Borderline personality disorder. And we made a clip about it on TikTok, and it was really well. People liked it. It's an interesting fact. And then someone wrote, he's a fictional character, right? Wait, what? Star Wars isn't real? What? Since when? I thought it was a documentary, bro.
English teachers be like,
jeez, salty.
Oh
just
my
a fun
God.
fact.
Yeah, we're just playing around, man.
Jeez Louise. And also, Tyler Moda, he's a fan of ours, and he's been trying to be on Biggest Hater of the Week for like a couple of days now by writing hilariously mean reviews, comments, which I know are just him trying to get on this comment.
Nice try, Tyler.
But hey, Tyler, here you go. You're you get honorable mention for. He wrote like one of our clips. He was like, "Is this a movie podcast or just IMDb fun fact reviews?"
That was good, Tyler.
Some people think you were serious.
We know you're a nice guy, Tyler. That's the problem. All right, that's it for the intermission.
Let's get back into Game of Thrones House Lannister.
Jaime, he goes through a lot. He goes through a major journey. You can compare him to like Arya Stark, because first his army is completely destroyed by Robb Stark's army. Like, they mess him up, and
he's captured.
And that's when he's captured, and he shares some time with Catelyn Stark, who makes the deal to have Brienne send him to King's Landing to free Sansa and Arya, although she doesn't know that Arya is actually not even in King's Landing anymore. So that's what sends Brienne and Jaime on their journey together. And Brienne and him, it's like Arya and the Hound, where two opposites are together and they're constantly clashing. But the more time they spend together, the more you see that they are very similar, and they grow a kinship. And even like there's this like unspoken like kind of love between the two of them that's never really
fully
explored. Yeah, there's the potential for it, but it never happens.
And you can really see like the heartbreak on Brienne's eyes and face when Jaime leaves to go be with Cersei at King's Landing, and she thought that they would eventually be together. I think we all thought they'd end up together.
Yeah, and they started out hating each other.
Yeah.
They hated each other. Like, Brienne was disturbed by anyone who's a Lannister. You know what I mean? She couldn't stand them, because Brienne first was loyal to Stannis, and then was first loyal to Renly, who was killed by the shadow that Stannis sent, and then she became loyal to whatever Catelyn Stark needed her to do, and this was her mission.
Yeah, and then one of my favorite Brienne and Jaime moments is when Jaime knights Brienne, and I think she became the first
before the Battle of Winterfell,
first female knight in Westeros, and it's a really powerful moment. It's really fun because all those people are just like around the fire talking about like what's about to happen, and we don't know what paths we'll all be in the next day or two with the war. And so then before it all, he knights her, and it's really moving.
One of the best scenes with them is the bear fight, when Brienne is put into that fighting pit with the bear, and then Jaime jumps in to help save her.
Yeah,
that was like, oh my God, Jaime really cares about her.
Yeah, so this is where he's becoming an honorable man. He's putting his life on the line to save other people and to help them.
That's the thing with the Lannisters. They grew up spoiled. You know, they grew up with everything they needed. They never wanted for anything, and so everyone goes through great amounts of trauma. Cersei stays in King's Landing, and she's always in power,
drinking wine,
drinking in comfort, but she loses 3 kids. So she goes through probably more trauma than any of the 3 of them. But Tyrion also, very much like Jaime, goes through a complete transformation because of his journey, and he ends up becoming an important figure to Daenerys, where he becomes her moral compass. He helps stop her from wanting to cause destruction, because I know people said they never showed any signs of Dany wanting to slaughter people or kill cities, but these are things she contemplated. She always contemplated, like, should I just burn the city down?
She said stuff like that throughout the seasons. Yeah, she says, like, I will burn cities to the ground. She has said things that she will eventually do.
Yeah, and it's the advisors she's always had by her side that always steered her in the direction of trying to be a good queen, and that's why, like, she frees the slaves in Marine. And that's why she becomes like the chain breaker is one of her names, because she's constantly trying to not be the Targaryen that loses their mind, but she's always enticed by the idea of causing destruction.
Absolutely.
I think that's why people were like, they never built up to this. I know they rushed the last 2 seasons, but there were always hints to Dany having this within her.
And she was getting this god complex like crazy because she was basically being worshipped. It's like the opposite of Cersei, where she was hated by the people of King's Landing and Westeros, and even that like walk of atonement, walk of shame. It's a horribly moving moment to watch because has to walk through King's Landing naked, and she's having feces thrown at her, and she's being berated by all these people who hate her. And I think Tyrion has a great line where it's like, it's hard to rule over millions of people who want you dead.
Yeah. Whereas that's a great point about Dany being like a revered, kind of like a demigod. And whenever anyone sees the dragons for the first time, like when Tyrion sees the dragons for the first time, it's such shock and disbelief, and it adds to her power in her myth and her legend, because no one alive has ever seen a dragon before, but she commands them and she birthed them. And so her people are devoted to her like a religion is to a god.
And there's another great moment between Tyrion and Dany where Dany's about to invade King's Landing, and she's like you said, she's enticed to burn it to the ground, because she's like, this was taken from me. This is my throne. I should have had this since I was a child. This was my birthright. And Tyrion says something like, you didn't come here to be queen of the ashes.
Yeah.
And for a moment, Dany is like, you can tell she hesitates to respond, because she's kind of like, that would be pretty dope to be queen of the ashes. But then
I like that.
And then she's like, of course not. Of course I didn't come here to do that. So for a moment, she's thinking about the power and like the gravitas that would come with doing something like that.
She hates the Lannisters and she hates the Baratheons. She wants to kill them all, and that's something she's always trying to keep at bay. And Tyrion's arrival becomes very important to Dany. He keeps her from causing a lot of destruction, and there are times when Tyrion even messes up. He fails, and his advice backfires a couple of times, and it gets to the point where she even questions whether he should still be her hand. But she keeps him, and I love 7th season when Jon Snow finally arrives on Dragonstone, and Tyrion's the one who greets them. Him and fucking what's his name? Davos.
I like the fucking what's his name better.
Sir Davos, the Onion Knight. He has a lot more in the book, Davos, but he's a very minor character in the show. He's
always around.
He's always around, but like he has his own chapters in the books.
He's like Creed in The Office. He has a couple one-liners every episode.
That's true. But I love when Tyrion and Jon meet for the first time in 7 years, because the last time they interacted was on the Wall, when Jon was in the Night's Watch and Tyrion was with them for a few episodes, and they had so much in common. And out of all the Starks and Lannisters, they're the only two that ever got along, and they kind of formed a friendship in a way. And they understand each other because they have mutual backgrounds, and they're both outcasts, like we said earlier, so they have a lot in common. And it's great when they finally see each other after all this time, because they both have aged so much. They both have gone through so much, and they look a lot different from one another. Jon has become a king, and Tyrion has become a morally good man.
One of my favorite episodes of Tyrion, one of my favorite plot points of him, is when he's on trial, and he's put on trial for the murder of Joffrey, which he didn't commit. He didn't commit the murder where he was poisoned. We actually talked about that last episode, how it was Lady Olenna.
Yeah.
He's on trial, and it's really great acting by Peter Dinklage. This is one of his best episodes for sure. He is sentenced to death, but he demands a trial by combat.
Oh yeah.
And he has his buddy Oberyn Martell fights for him.
It's a great episode because Oberyn is a revered warrior, and he's one of the most lethal killers in all of Westeros. But Cersei, her champion, is the Mountain. And Oberyn versus the Mountain is easily one of the best episodes. It's a great fight because Oberyn is super talented and skilled, and so he's actually putting up a fight with this gigantic human being of the Mountain. And it seems like Oberyn is gonna win because he secretly has poisoned his blade on his spear. But then the Mountain just takes him and literally gouges his eyeballs out and just smashes his head into the pavement. And it's just like, it's insane. It's the most, oh my God, it's incredible. It's crazy. But the Mountain is such an important part of Cersei's storyline because he's always been her number one Kingsguard. And she's always had him by his side. And after this fight with Oberyn, because he was poisoned by the blade, he was going to die. But Maester Qyburn, he's like an experimental scientist, you could say. And we don't know what he did to the Mountain, but he helped the Mountain survive the horrible poison that was going to kill him. And the Mountain became like a superpowered zombie, like an unstoppable force. And
he's like Bane in Batman
Returns.
He's
like Bane. Yeah, exactly. Like, and you can see like this zombie face, but behind his mask. And it's a great scene when you don't know how powerful he is now until the High Sparrow sends that group of Faith Militant to bring Cersei for her trial, and she's like, no way. And the Mountain's right next to her, and then the Faith Militant, they pull out like a bunch of swords and axes, and then they're like, if you don't come, there will be violence. And then Cersei's like, I choose violence. And then the Mountain steps in front of her, and one of the guys throws an axe into the Mountain's chest and pulls it out, and the guy like didn't even move, and then he just rips that guy's head off. And the other guy, the Faith Militant, are like, oh shit. Yeah, we're gonna go. But then the Mountain also has a great conclusion to his story where he can't protect Cersei anymore. She's the castle is falling apart because of Dany's dragon fire, and Sandor shows up, and it's this great final duel between Sandor and Gregor, where Sandor is finally trying to avenge the childhood that was taken from him by Gregor, because Gregor is the one who deformed Sandor by when he was a little kid. He threw his face into the flames of a fire and burned his face up, and he's always been an extremely dominant figure in Sandor's life. And so it was that fight at the end. It's great to see that fight, and Sandor did get the better of his brother finally, even though they both died.
And back to Tyrion's trial real quick. So Tywin eventually sentences him.
Yeah,
to
I went way off the rails.
No, it's good. It's great. The Mountain's a super interesting dude.
Yeah.
Tywin eventually sentences Tyrion to death, even though he's his son and everything, and he's imprisoned. And that's obviously where we talked about Jaime helps him escape. And then Tyrion kills Shay because Shay betrayed Tyrion out of jealousy, I think it was, because of his marriage to Sansa.
No.
Right? Or why'd he kill Shay?
After Tyrion escaped the prison, and Jaime was like, okay, find a way out, Tyrion went to his father's bedroom, and he secretly saw Shay and Tywin having sex, and Shay called Tywin her lion, and that's what she used to call Tyrion.
But then wasn't she part of the trial against Tyrion?
She wasn't like, I mean, she
was like the last witness that said that he was the one that killed Joffrey.
Yeah, that's why he killed Shay.
Then he kills Shay, and then she technically she takes the knife to try to stab him.
Yeah.
And then he strangles her. But then it's the great scene where he kills Tywin on the loo, the English word for the toilet. And that's a great scene because Tywin, his whole life, has been saying, "You're not my son. I can't prove that you're not my son." But while he's about to be shot, right before he's being shot with the crossbow, he's like, "You are my son. You're my son. Let's just talk about this. Let's go talk civilized in the other room."
Hey, champ. Hey, sport.
Hey, there you are.
Want to have a catch outside?
I was just thinking about you on the toilet. How are you?
I miss my son Tyrion.
I hope he shows up. And Tyrion's talking to him. He's like, even though you know that I didn't kill Joffrey, you knew it wasn't me. You still sentenced me to death. Why? And it's because Tywin always wanted some reason to kill Tyrion and wanted to be able to do it.
Yeah, that's a great point. He was always looking for a cause to kill Tyrion, and because Tywin loved his wife very much, and losing her really changed him and turned him into the hardened soul that he became.
Yeah, he always blamed Tyrion for her death, and also you could see that he blamed Tyrion for the reputation around Westeros that was created because of Tyrion being born the way he was and his family, and because they're Lannisters and they're supposed to be, these godlike, they see themselves as godlike humans. They're better than everybody. And so he never saw Tyrion as living up to that expectation that he wanted, even though there's nothing wrong with Tyrion. And he's the most interesting and probably most intelligent person in Westeros.
And that's why Tyrion is the one who develops that moral compass that you can say Jaime becomes a good man, but ultimately I think Tyrion makes the greatest transformation into being a good person out of the three kids. And whereas Cersei, like I said earlier, she goes in the opposite direction. Once Tommen kills himself because the first two kids, not her fault. Joffrey was poisoned.
He was also a huge D-bag.
Yeah, he was. She should have done a better job raising him. Like, if he wasn't such a little shit, he could have been maybe no one would have wanted to kill him. I don't know. But Myrcella was killed as revenge for Oberyn, and so that wasn't Cersei's fault because it was in the best interest of keeping peace with the Martells by marrying Myrcella off to the young Martell prince. And so that was just, typical political thing that families do. But Tommen was her fault, his suicide, because she is the one who blew up the temple, and Marjorie was inside that temple. She knew Marjorie was in that temple, and she hated Marjorie. And Tommen, having recently married her, was in love with Marjorie and devoted to her as his queen. And so once she died, he felt he couldn't live life anymore, and so he jumped out that window. Cersei had no idea he would take it that hard. She was thinking only about herself by blowing up that temple and her hatred for Marjorie, rather than trying to contemplate how would my son react to his wife's death. And that's why I think she becomes such a dark person, because she realized that she was the cause of Tommen's suicide. She makes Jaime turn against her because when Jon and the Allied forces come to King's Landing to have that parlay, and he shows them the zombie guy,
the zombie dude.
Yeah, the zombie dude. And they make that deal. Cersei agrees to ally with them to stop this dead army. And then after they leave, Cersei tells Jaime that she lied and she's planning to betray the Starks and the Targaryens because it will allow her to keep power in King's Landing. And this betrayal, this is the turning point for Jaime, where he's like, this is the last straw. Like, I can't believe, he can't believe that she doesn't understand the danger that everyone is in, and that she's still playing politics when everyone's life is at stake. And that's when Jaime decides, I can't be with you anymore, and he leaves.
Yeah, well, she's the one, I think, of all the Lannisters, she falls into the self-pride trait more than anybody out of all of them, because, she cares only about more power.
Oh, yeah, because Jaime and Tyrion absolve themselves of their pride. Mm-hmm. Tyrion especially eliminates pride from himself completely. And Tyrion, so my prediction when we were seasons 5 and 6 through, I thought that Tyrion was going to wind up in power. I thought that Dany and Jon were going to have a baby, and throughout the events of the final season, Jon and Dany would both be killed. And I thought Tyrion and maybe a couple other people like Sansa and Arya would survive. Otherwise, I thought everyone was going to die. And I predicted that Tyrion was going to be the steward of Westeros until Jon Snow and Dany's child grew of age to become king or queen. That was my prediction. But so I was wrong, but ultimately I was kind of right that Tyrion would survive and be in a place of power because he's the hand of the king.
Yeah, I think the rumors of Tyrion being king were awesome, and I would have liked that to see that too, because the way that they ended season 7 was Jon, Dany, and Tyrion both get one long shot on them at the end of the show, at the end of the episode, the last episode, with the music playing, and the last shot is of Tyrion, and he's on the top of that castle, and it's pulling out, and even though he's a dwarf, he looks immense in this shot because he's kind of like on top of this castle, and you can just see his head like overlooking it, and it kind of was like maybe he's gonna be king of it all at the end. Who knows?
Yeah. But I was happy to see Tyrion as Hand of the King because Bran's a weirdo. I mean, because Bran's a weirdo. And, you need someone normal, like, right next to him as his first man. You know what I mean? So I think Tyrion was the perfect choice for Hand of the King. And, I mean, Jaime and Cersei's deaths, I guess you're right when you said that, like, they belonged together when they died because they truly did love each other. So I guess it was nice that they reunited right before their deaths.
Yeah, because I think we all knew Jaime, of course he loved Cersei, but did Cersei completely love him the same way? Was she just using it for lust or boredom or just because he was around? Who knows, maybe? But it kind of like solidified their love for me.
Yeah, that's a good point.
And also Tyrion, in terms of swallowing his pride and growing, a lot happens. That happens a lot when he is forced to marry Sansa. And he never tries to take advantage of her, and they never sleep together or anything like that. And
that's because he's in love with Shay.
Yeah, but he also it's a good way for them both to protect each other in the situations that they're in.
Do you want to move on to some superlatives?
Yeah, let's do some superlatives.
Who's your MVP of House Lannister?
Tyrion, come on.
Yeah, me
he's
too.
The man.
Yeah,
he's
Tyrion's the best.
He's the best dialogue. He's obviously he's witty and hilarious, but like. He's like that. I think he has that line. He's like, "There's nothing worse than a philosopher who like blooms too late" or something like that. He just has so many great lines throughout the entire show.
What's your best scene for House Lannister? Did you not prepare a best scene? It's okay. I'll tell you my best scene.
Let me think about it.
I'll tell you my best scene, and you just think about it. Okay. So just sit there and think. Think about what you didn't do. Think about what you did not do. So I think the best scene is Tyrion's trial, which you mentioned earlier, because it's a moment where Tyrion finally speaks to his father the way he's always wanted to speak to him. Because Tywin says, "You're on trial for murder." And then Tyrion says, "No, I'm not. I'm on trial for being a dwarf. And I've been on trial for being a dwarf my entire life." And it's such a powerful moment for Tyrion because it's something that he's always held inside that he's never been able to say to his father. But now that he has nothing to lose, he's just letting it out. And then he also says, "I didn't kill Joffrey, but I wish I had." And watching him die gave me more pleasure than 1,000 bedded women.
My favorite scene actually is probably when Tyrion kills Tywin.
Yeah,
it's a really powerful moment for him because he finally gets to get power over his father for the first time in his life.
Yeah,
after being told that he's not his father's son.
Best shot,
I think, when Cersei uses the wildfire to burn down the scepter. That's pretty crazy.
That's great. That's a great shot. I would say probably the shot when Tommen jumps out the window because it ends that season maybe.
I think it is, yeah.
And it was like so surprising. And it was like came out of nowhere. Like you didn't think, like he just like walked into his chambers and he opens the window and you're like, oh, he's just opening the window. And then he just walks right out the window. It's like, oh my God. It was so shocking. Best actor, Peter Dinklage.
100%.
Yeah.
100%.
Yeah. Best line? Did you not prepare?
No, I had it. It's Tyrion. All these are Tyrion. He says, we form allies with our enemies, not our friends. I like that.
It's great. Great. Yeah. Mine is once you've accepted your flaws, no one can use them against you, which is what he tells Jon Snow.
Oh, no, hold on. We make peace with our enemies, not with our friends.
Got it.
That's what it is.
Yeah.
All right, that wraps our episode of Game of Thrones House Lannister. We'll be taking a break from Game of Thrones for about like a week, and then we'll do Targaryen to wrap up the show. Really hope you enjoyed this episode, everyone. Go check out RaidersOfTheLostPodcast.com for all of our content. Use all of our coupon codes to help keep the lights on for the show and become a patron today at patreon.com/RaidersOfTheLostPodcast.
Take care, everyone.
Thank you for watching Raiders of the Lost Podcast. Hit that subscribe button and notification bell. Listen to the audio format of Raiders of the Lost Podcast on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, Google Podcasts, and wherever you listen to podcasts. New episodes every Monday and Thursday. Support us on Patreon at patreon.com/Raiders of the Lost Podcast.